Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. From fresh produce to tender cuts of meat, Safeway proudly supports Colorado farms and local small businesses. You support local when you shop at Safeway or in the Safeway app.
Over the weekend, people kept showing up across Colorado to protest ICE. It all follows the shooting of a woman, Renee Nicole Macklin Good, by federal agents in Minneapolis. Good grew up in Colorado Springs. In Denver, hundreds gather at the state capitol and march through downtown, remembering Good and calling out ICE's actions, with immigrant rights groups leading chants and speeches. On the western slope, several hundred people turn out in Grand Junction for a silent protest, holding signs, honoring people who've died in immigration custody, and calling for ICE to be abolished. And it wasn't just those two cities. Protests also popped up in places like Boulder and Superior. In Colorado Springs, people marched from Acacia Park to City Hall, demanding accountability and answers. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel.
And I'm Bazi Kanani. Coming up, a lot fewer people are dying of violence in Denver, and changing policing may be part of it.
We're actually investing in a neighborhood or investing in a community rather than just putting officers in there to enforce the law.
Also, there are back-to-back proposals to increase utility rates for more than 1 million Coloradans. Then, going once, going twice, nothing. Why there were no bids for a big auction of drilling rights on public land.
There are better ways to be managing this land.
Plus, E470 drivers know the toll road's signs can be good for a chuckle.
Text you will not, safe you will be.
Find out who's behind those silly slogans and why you don't see them as much on other roads.
It's Monday, January 12th. Here's the news in Colorado today.
Denver is becoming a safer place, at least when it comes to homicide. Fewer people were killed in the city last year than any year since 2014. And when you account for population growth, it's the lowest homicide rate since 1990. That's according to the police department. For some perspective on why the rate dropped so much and how it compares to other places, Denverite reporter Kyle Harris joins us. Hi, Kyle.
Hey, Bazi.
37 people were killed in homicides in the city last year. That's compared to a high of 96 killings in 2021. What do the people you've talked with credit for this change?
Well, the first thing to think about is homicide spiked during the pandemic. So in recent years, it dropped back closer to normal levels. And it's kept trending down. So last year, there were 48% fewer homicides just compared to the year before. And for that, the Denver police give a lot of credit to themselves.
Themselves?
Mm-hmm.
What do they think they're doing right?
They point to several new strategies meant to prevent shootings. They've been targeting high crime areas in the city and working with other city departments to provide more lighting, better fencing, and more active storefronts. The idea isn't to necessarily police these areas more heavily, but instead to change the environment to make it less likely that crime will happen there. This is how Police Chief Ron Thomas talks about it.
We're actually investing in a neighborhood or investing in a community rather than just putting officers in there to enforce the law. And often what we see at the end of it is significant reductions in crime without a significant increase in contacts.
The city is also working with groups known as violence disruptors. They work directly with people most likely to offend. So, say someone who's lost a friend or loved one to violence. The hope's to interrupt that cycle.
And that raises an interesting question. When we're talking about homicides in the city, what are the main causes?
Well, the most common scenario is that a fight breaks out between two people who know each other somehow. This often happens late at night, often around club and bar let-out. The second most common reason is domestic violence. Last year, both domestic violence killings and also gang-related homicides dropped. And the chief said there weren't any fatal shootings at house parties, which is a big change from the past.
Are there a lot of house party shootings?
It's been a real issue in Denver.
So homicides are down. What about other types of crime in the city? Is this part of a broader trend?
Well, crime across the city is down, but not by nearly as much as homicides. For instance, non-fatal shootings dropped 34% compared to nearly 50% for homicides, and overall violent crime dropped just 6% in Denver last year. But here's one other thing Chief Thomas brought up. He says another reason there are fewer killings is simply that police are getting better at emergency medical care.
Really? How's that?
Well, I thought this was fascinating. So when officers get to a shooting before paramedics, they now have better training to help keep the victims alive.
Often they are applying chest seals and applying tourniquets and doing life-saving measures before ambulances arrive to take them to urgent medical care.
So basically, the police are turning what would have been homicides in the past into non-fatal shootings.
That certainly sounds like important training. Is that a new thing?
Well, police have been offering medical care to shooting victims for years. But Chief Thomas says the training has improved. And not only that, so is the implementation.
Okay. Back to the question about larger trends in crime. What about other cities? Are homicides down in many other places too?
Absolutely. So Denver can be proud that homicides are coming down at greater rates than the national trend from last year. That said, it shouldn't necessarily feel that special. I talked to Ernesto Lopez. He's a researcher with the Council on Criminal Justice. He says Denver's basically catching up to what's already been happening in other cities, where homicides started dropping in big ways even before last year.
Once all the data really come in through the end of the year for many other cities, I would expect that story to really hold, that the declines we were seeing in 23 and 24 continue throughout in 2025.
Baltimore, St. Louis, Seattle, and other cities have all seen big declines. In San Francisco, the homicide rate is at its lowest level since 1950.
A trend we hope will continue.
Hope, definitely. But Lopez also warned that homicide rates do rise and fall over time.
So we can have some cautious optimism. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
First, your electric bill. Now, depending on where you live, your gas and water bills may be going up. Some of Colorado's largest utilities are seeking rate hikes again. Late last year, Xcel Energy asked their state regulators for permission to raise the average residential electric bill by 10%. Now, they're also asking to raise rates for gas by about 11%. CPR's Sam Brash is reporting on Xcel's potential rate changes. Sam, how will this affect wallets? I mean, how much more in dollar terms could people be paying?
There are more than 1 million Coloradans who get both their electricity and gas from Xcel. If the Public Utilities Commission approves both rate hikes, the average monthly bill for those folks would go up by more than $17. That's $10 on electricity and $7 for gas. So if people are currently paying on average like about $166 a month, starting next October, they could be looking at a bill of $183 on that joint electricity and gas bill.
Sam, why is Xcel seeking permission for more rate hikes now, especially at a time when the high cost of living is already a big strain for so many people?
Xcel says it's about safety. They say these rate increases are needed to cover the cost of infrastructure updates and repairs. But Xcel Energy is a publicly traded company, and some of the money would also be paying for returns to their investors. There is likely to be opposition to these rate increases from consumer advocacy groups and consumers themselves. State regulators are now accepting public comments on the proposals and will have public hearings scheduled in the upcoming months.
CPR's Sam Brash. And if you happen to be a customer of Denver Water, your bill will also be a bit higher this year. A few bucks a month for the average household of 4. The rate increase is already in effect. Denver Water says it needs the additional money to fund infrastructure improvements. A recent property auction in Colorado was a dud. Not even a single bidder. The failed attempt to lease drilling rights on more than 20,000 acres of public land may be a statement about the limits for expanding energy production in the state.
That just would suggest that any oil that you could ever get out of these acres would not be profitable even at those minimal prices.
That's Aaron Wise, Deputy Director at the Center of Western Priorities. It's an environmental group that's criticized the auction as a wasteful use of time. Now, if no one even wants to use the land for oil and gas drilling, why is the Bureau of Land Management trying to lease it out? CPR climate and environmental reporter Ishan Thakur tells us what he learned about it.
Hey, Arlo. Yeah, basically it comes down to the Trump administration wanting to ramp up drilling on public land, maybe more than some companies do. So the auction was for parcels of land in Jackson, Moffett, and Garfield counties. That land was being offered for drilling to oil and gas companies to lease for basically a song, just $10 an acre as the starting bid. Still, only 2 companies even registered for the auction, and they ended up not even bidding. And these parcels, they were also offered in December for leasing, and they had no takers then either.
So why did BLM offer them for leasing again?
Yeah, it's pretty clear that those areas are not exactly desirable for oil and gas drilling, but that BLM was required by law to hold this auction. It's called a replacement sale, and it's kind of like a liquidation sale. It's part of President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. So anytime the BLM tries to auction off drilling rights on public land, if a significant amount is not leased, they have to offer it up again to see if they can get takers a second time.
Will he be offering more land in the future?
While last week's auction was a bust, there are more expected this year. So analysts expect that more than 250,000 acres of public lands in Colorado will be offered up for oil and gas leasing in the next 6 months, and a lot of that may end up being developed.
Thanks, Ishan.
You're welcome.
You've probably seen them when driving along highways around the state, those large electronic signs with blocky letters spelling out messages for drivers. Things like,
"There's a crash ahead, 3 miles up, right lane closed."
Pretty straightforward and practical. And then there's E470. That toll road on the east side of the Denver metro area likes to take a more tongue-in-cheek approach to getting the message across.
Feast your eyes on the road. For the Thanksgiving theme. Give the gift of safe driving. 'Tis the season to buckle up. And then the classic texting and driving. Oh, sell no.
The signs give Andrea Aldridge of Aurora a chuckle, and she reached out to CPR to help her solve the mystery of the who's and why's behind them as part of our Colorado Wonders series.
I drive the road frequently enough that now with all the changing seasons, I know they're going to have something new and creative each time. And so I really look forward to reading all of the signs on the E470 boards to safely tell people to drive carefully and be aware of what they're doing.
Turns out these punny, quirky roadway safety notes take some time to come up with. About an hour of brainstorming, according to E470 Communications Supervisor Shelby Costello.
I want it to be fun and entertaining, but also it has to fit on a sign. So it can only be so many words. So you can come up with an idea, then you have to dial it back a little bit so it's actually feasible to put on these signs.
It also, of course, has to clearly convey a message of safety. For instance, they had a Halloween-themed sign warning drivers to watch for skeletons crossing, and that fell flat.
We had a customer reach out and say, "I was confused by that message," and we immediately pulled it from rotation. So if there's any concern about clarity, that's a concern for us, and we pull that out of rotation to make sure that that doesn't confuse anyone else.
E470 is in a special position when it comes to using message boards. 2 years ago, the Federal Highway Administration created new rules that recommend state agencies avoid roadway messages that are too punny, with the concern that it could confuse drivers. But E470 is funded by tolls and fees rather than taxpayer dollars, which means the creativity continues to flow for its marketing team.
We could say, snowplow in process, know your lane.
I love it. Know your lane.
Know your lane.
What do you wonder about our state? You can send us your question at cpr.org/Colorado Wonders.
Additional reporting for today's show came from CPR's Nathan Fernando Frescas and Paulo Shalcera. Follow Colorado Today in your podcast app. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel.
And I'm Bazi Kanani. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. From fresh produce to tender cuts of meat, Safeway proudly supports Colorado farms and local small businesses. You support local when you shop at Safeway or in the Safeway app.